So, David, whilst we've got you, our main topic for today's session is talking about the relationship between rainwater harvesting and sustainable urban or sustainable drainage systems. As it's in the past been or with sustainable drainage systems, when people are looking at the plans of their project, whether it's a commercial building or even a small dwelling, they will need to conform to the SuDS legislation. Some people may think, well, capturing the rainwater, that would be, in essence, is the stormwater, and putting it to good use is the right thing to do and could meet those guidelines. But what is the relationship like? What is the relationship like? Sorry, is that way to go about it, or is there other things they would need to consider?
Yes, it's a super good concept to consider, and of course, we want to promote the reuse of rainwater as much as we can to reduce on mains water consumption. Just to give the viewers a bit of an idea, if they're not aware of what firstly is stormwater, and then what, of course, is rainwater harvesting. So sustainable urban drainage systems is what we do to reduce the surge runoff of stormwater into a particular area. And they're usually designed in terms of the surface area that's they're collecting from, where they are, of course. And then you generally have a year like event period, where this could be a 30-year event period, 50, 100, depending on the scope of the project, the scale. But that's parameters can change significantly. And of course, the larger the storm event period, the bigger tank you need to support it. So the idea with SuDS is to reduce the risk of flood and just risks in general. And when we say it's sustainable urban drainage systems, of course, urban kind of points towards towns and cities, but you can look to install these on small developments as well. So that's just something to keep in mind, your eye on. So catchment of that rainwater goes into an underground storage tank, usually quite big. And then from that storage tank, you generally had a choked out flow, some sort of break to slow the flow of that water down into the main drainage system. With rainwater harvesting, pretty much the concept stays the same to begin with. We're very much collecting that rainwater. It's going down into a storage tank. And then from that storage tank, we are retaining it so we can then reuse it later for our irrigation, for our toilet flushing, all these other different things, which we talk about when we do rainwater harvesting. So that's the idea of rainwater harvesting. And rainwater harvesting generally will have an overflow to, again, could be to a soakaway or could be to a sustainable underground urban drainage system. So they've got similarities. The big question, of course, which we are really looking at today is, can we substitute the rainwater? Can that rainwater help support the SuDS solution? Now, in terms of legislation and regulations, the answer is no, more often than not. And that's just because with the stormwater requirements, you must have that size of tank in place in case you have that year storm event. It could be that you have that year storm event when your rainwater harvesting system, which is parked in front of your SuDS solution, it basically is full. Mm-hmm. So you haven't got any capacity, any surplus to the requirements. So we're not relieving the strain on the SuDS solution, the sustainable urban drainage solution. So having the rainwater harvesting system is a really good thing to have, because it's kind of a surplus to requirements. But of course, if you any surplus requirements, so in terms of future developments, all that sort of thing, the rainwater harvesting system will help preventing flood risk. Yeah. But it's not a substitution for SuDS. It's above and beyond that. And of course, if we do have that rainwater harvesting system in place, we can have all the benefits of the rainwater harvesting system in place. So we can reuse that water, the environmental impact, the reduction on the mains water demand, all those sorts of things. So yeah, it's not a substitution, but it certainly can help with the risk of floods, because we have got potential additional volume in that rainwater harvesting tank. So your SuDS solution is always there. Say it's 100 cube. Mm-hmm. If you have a 20,000 litre rainwater harvesting tank in front, if you were to have your event period and that rainwater harvesting tank was empty, you've got an additional 20,000 litres worth of volume there. Yeah. So it's helpful, but it's not a substitution.
Perfect. I think that encapsulates it very well, in the fact that with rainwater harvesting, it is, as you mentioned, not the substitute, because with SuDS and stormwater, it's for alleviating that potential 1 in 100 storm event.
Yes.
So if all of a sudden we had that event and your like you said, mentioned the rainwater harvesting tank was full, it means your system would just flood over and would fail. But saying that, would one way around it be just to have a gigantic rainwater harvesting system, just in case there was that 1 in 100-year storm event?
I wouldn't like to comment. The chances are it would probably be okay, but for the rule, legislation and regulations, it's probably not best, because it's all to do with how much, first, of course, rainwater you're capturing and how much demand. If you've got an absolutely huge demand, which is always drawing down that rainwater harvesting tank, you're pretty much always going to have some sort of capacity within that tank. But we can't guarantee for sure that is going to be available when we have our big storm events. So they have to be kept separate.
Cool. So if someone was building their property, they would have to first take into their SuDS consideration and get that approved. And then if they wish to look at rainwater harvesting for saving water and put it to reuse, they'd have to look at that after that one.
So the solution becomes prior to it, because of course we're channeling the water from our catchment areas down into our retention tank first, and that will overflow into the attenuation solution. And of course that would then have the choked outlets to reduce the flow away from the site. So it's kind of like a retaining tank up front, so we can reuse it later if we wish to.
Perfect. I think you've explained that very well. See, there's no rust. We haven't done it for a year, but you're right back at it. But that was the main discussion for today's session, was talking about the rainwater harvesting relationship with SuDS and how you can meet it. And as I think David's quite well said, it's when it comes to your project, your SuDS will be your kind of first protocol. That's the first thing you got to meet. And then rainwater harvesting is the addition to it. If you wish to save water on your project, then that's the way to go.